I'm Karen Rogers, the Enterprise GIS and Data Visualization Coordinator for the Wyoming Department of Enterprise Technology Services. I'm currently serving as the president of the Wyoming Geospatial Organization, or WyGEO, which is an organization for GIS professionals across the state. I'm also the past president of the National States Geographic Information Council, or NSGIC. WyGEO members represent a diverse cross-section of the economy, as we work in different agencies, industries, and institutions across the state. Every year, the GIS community around the world celebrates GIS Day in November. Usually, we are leading fun and interactive sessions in schools, or hosting open houses to highlight our services. Since we couldn't celebrate in person this year, we decided to take our GIS Day presentation online and focus on what GIS can do, especially for those working in any branch of state government. We promise to keep it short and entertaining, and we hope that you come away with your own ideas of what GIS can do for you. I encourage you to reach out if you'd like to learn more or explore possibilities. And thank you.
GIS, what does that stand for? Every GIS professional gets this question. The answer is Geographic Information Systems. And if that sounded like blah, blah, blah to you, you're not alone. They're just 3 words put together. You know what those words are, but together they don't do a great job of explaining what GIS really means. So let's break it down. We'll start with geographic. That's just geography. Remember globes? Those were cool. On a globe or a map, you could look for the state capital of Nevada, or maybe see where the Sierra Nevada range was raised up from the surface. Those are examples of the second word, information. The fact that a city is the state capital, the fact that the Sierra Nevada mountains are higher than the surrounding areas, those are additional information about a place that go beyond just where it is on the map. But those are just known facts displayed for quick reference. Sometimes, mapping out geographic information can show you other things that you didn't know. One of the most famous examples of this is a map of the 1854 cholera outbreak in the Soho neighborhood of London. At the time, it was believed cholera spread through vapors in the air. Physician John Snow went door to door, conducting interviews, and mapped where deaths from cholera had occurred. The map showed cases clustered around a water pump on Broad Street. Cases far from the pump still had a connection to it, like the woman who had moved 4 miles away, but still had water delivered from the pump because she preferred the taste. The brewery nearby had no deaths from cholera. Not only did the brewery have its own water supply, the brewery workers likely didn't drink water because they were given a daily allowance of free beer, proving that water hasn't always been the healthier option. Dr. Snow convinced officials to remove the pump's handle, and cases plummeted. The link between water and cholera was revealed by geographic information. 166 years later, geographic information is still powerful. But it's the S in GIS, the systems, that have increased that power in ways previous generations of mapmakers couldn't have imagined. You can't touch a paper map and get any more information than what's already there. The population of Carson City or its annual budget aren't printed on a globe. But when geographic information is digital, the possibilities are endless. Click on a modern map and all kinds of additional information about that location displays. You can keep information up to date without having to reprint and redistribute the map. The steps of data collection, analysis, map making and data visualization, and communication to an audience are linked through networks and devices into a geographic information system. Data no longer sits on paper forms and filing cabinets. Powerful computers can crunch mountains of geographic data in real time. Modern epidemiology has taken full advantage of GIS. The Johns Hopkins COVID-19 dashboard is the most widely recognized example, with data being collected from around the world, updated in real time, and then distributed back out around the world. but even old maps can get an updated, modern look. So now you know, GIS is a boring name for an exciting, rapidly growing technology. GIS identifies needs, anticipates problems, evaluates outcomes, engages the public. This makes it an important tool for implementing policies and making strategic and budgetary decisions. Here in Wyoming, GIS professionals are helping to tackle some of the state's toughest problems. In this video, we'll present 3 of those problems and how GIS is being used to find solutions. We'll start with epidemiology, but probably not the kind you're thinking of.
Hi, I'm Denise Jensen with the Wyoming Game and Fish Department, and I'm going to talk to you today about chronic wasting disease, or CWD, and how GIS is helping to understand and combat this disease. First, I'm sure most of you have heard of or know what CWD is, but a quick recap is CWD is a chronic fatal disease of the central nervous system caused by abnormally folded proteins called prions. Transmission is most likely animal to animal, but could also be through a prion-contaminated environment. Animals appear normal and healthy until the later stages of the disease when clinical signs appear. This disease impacts elk and moose, but it is far more prevalent in deer. CWD was first identified in 1967 and showed up in free-range herds in Colorado around 1974. The first occurrences in Wyoming were found in free-ranging mule deer in southeastern Wyoming in 1985, followed by elk in 1986. About 10 years later, it would start to be found in other states and Canada. A few years ago, it was even found in Finland and Sweden. Looking specifically in Wyoming, one way GIS can help is by visualizing the spread of the disease. If we look at deer hunt areas that have had deer with CWD found in them, we see that CWD is now in over half of our state, with new hunt areas being added every year. This is an interactive map found on the Game and Fish website. If you would like to explore this map or any of the others like it in this presentation, I have listed the URL. As I said earlier, elk and moose have been less affected by CWD, and currently these are the elk hunt areas where CWD has been found in elk. And here is the lone moose hunt area where CWD has been detected in moose. If we go back to just focusing on deer and look at the new hunt areas added year by year, starting in 1990, then 1997, and almost yearly after that, we can see how it has spread across the landscape to the current time. Wyoming went from one hunt area in 1990 to 30 years later, we now have it in 97 of the 128 hunt areas. Another way to look at the progression of the disease is to create density maps of where the animals were found or harvested that tested positive for CWD. This map represents all species combined for the years 1998 through 2005. It is fairly concentrated to the southeast portion of the state, but if you look at the same map for the years 2006 through 2019, you see the density increasing to the north and west. These maps make it quick and easy to understand movement and where it is concentrating at. A third example is prevalence. Within each herd, CWD is likely spread the most from animal to animal contact, so understanding this is important. The map shows prevalence within the deer herds from 2014 through 2018 from hunter-harvested deer. The previous location trends still apply, but there are herds that we don't have enough samples from for an accurate prevalence comparison. Here is the same map, but for elk herd units from the same time frame, and there is even more insufficient sample sizes. This is one of the many reasons Game and Fish is ramping up testing for deer and elk. This year, certain hunt areas for both species were identified where there is a large focus on getting samples for CWD testing. In order to do this, we needed to get the word out to hunters to make sure they knew we requested samples from those areas. One way we did this was to create maps and put them in a flyer that went out to hunters. The maps show the hunt areas in a color that sticks out and makes it easy for the hunter to identify if their hunt area is included or not. Another way to get the word out was to make those hunt areas prominent in the hunt planner. The hunt planner is a resource to help hunters get started on planning a hunt. It includes an interactive map for each species with hunt areas, regulations, land status, and much more. Once hunters have harvested their animal, focus shifts to the spread of the disease by the movement of carcass parts. Each state has their own regulations and what they allow out-of-state hunters to bring back home with them. In order to keep CWD out, some of the states have strict regulations and don't allow any high-risk parts, which include anything that is part of the head and some organs. Here is an example from Iowa and Wisconsin, where they mapped the home zip codes of everyone who harvested deer in 3 of their counties for 2016 and 2017. This helps to illustrate why the previous map of regulations is important and how easily CWD can spread if the proper precautions with carcasses are not taken. One way Wyoming is helping with this issue is to let hunters know where there are CWD-approved carcass disposal sites. This interactive map on the Game and Fish website lets people quickly find the one closest to them, and by clicking on the red icon, the name and address will display. Maps showing hunt areas, township and range, and other landmarks were handed out to meat processors and taxidermists around the state, so hunters could mark the location of harvest to help with reporting. Our last map from the WyGEO GIS helps illustrate the distribution of CWD through North America as of February 2019, and how it has more than likely affected the captive facility industry. The medium gray shaded areas are current free-range populations with CWD, while the dark gray is free-range populations with CWD known prior to 2000. This helps to quickly understand how much CWD has spread since 2000 and where CWD is on the landscape in relation to captive facilities. The red points represent current captive facilities, and the yellow are depopulated facilities. You can see a large number of captive facilities have been shut down, with CWD more than likely being a huge contributing factor. I know I have shown you a lot of maps and examples today, but these are just a few ways that GIS is helping to understand CWD and all aspects of epidemiology. Thank you for your time.
The official creation of the GIS Mapping Committee under the Wyoming Weed and Pest Council occurred in 2015, but the story of using GIS in invasive species management started long before then. Some districts have worked with GIS since 1995, but in 2007 began the effort for the statewide use of GIS in the individual weed and pest district's invasive species management strategy. I want to make it clear that this wasn't about a statewide database, but to help each weed and pest district use GIS to strategize land management without costing an arm and a leg. That began with digitizing information from all the paper maps where the information already existed. And then we started with collecting in a digital formats using very basic handheld GPSs, the wrist GPSs, and going on to computerized systems in trucks, along with tablets and handheld PDAs. Some older data collection methods are still being used, along with newer technologies. We still use simple handheld GPS units, but we also use apps on phones or tablets, along with more advanced truck spray equipment, along with mapping drones and spraying drones. So besides recording invasive species infestation locations, Another goal was to make the treatment information digital. All right, so now we have all this data that we've collected for years. How do we use it? One of the biggest benefits to having this GIS information is being able to work with partners. Weed and pest districts across Wyoming work with numerous partners, including, but not limited to, private landowners, local, state, and federal agencies, the Wind River Indian Reservation, and working groups, such as conservation working groups. GIS allows these districts to work with these entities to identify problems and strategize on invasive management. Within the individual weed and pest districts, they can use GIS to set their priorities for treatment of invasive species. Each district has limited resources, and this allows them to see how they can use those resources to the best of their abilities. So not only is GIS used in the treatment of invasive species, it's also used to manage or protect areas and identify areas that are considered to have low or no invasive infestations. It allows the districts to manage or monitor their spray crews using very inexpensive and simple means to do so. GIS allows districts to track contact with the landowners and keep history of those contacts. It allows the districts to gather public input through public surveys and websites and show the results of that information. It allows the districts to distribute information to the public. And on more of a statewide basis, we use GIS for the distribution of invasive species across the state at a township level, and the tracking of biological control releases and the monitoring information that goes along with that. To disperse to the public the locations of where to purchase weed-free forage and the location of certified weed-free gravel pits for reclamation work. It also allows us to work with entities such as the state lands. It also allows the weed and pest districts to work on special projects that are statewide. It also allows us to work with partners on conservation efforts. So the use of GIS by Wyoming weed and pest districts is always growing and always be an important part of invasive management. I want to say thank you to all the weed and pest districts for all the effort that they've put into making the GIS programs within the districts grow from the very beginning through all these years.
One of the areas where GIS is being used to make informed decisions for the state of Wyoming is in the area of bringing broadband or internet access to our rural communities around the state. Case in point, bringing broadband internet access to our Wyoming communities, which has been a state priority for several years, recently became a critical need. As school students, teachers, and working families around the state transitioned to an at-home learning and work environment, the critical nature of connectivity became paramount to maintaining our productivity during a global pandemic. One of the ways we are tackling this problem is with data. Now, one of the challenges we have in Wyoming is that broadband information is reported at the federal level by the census block, which in a rural state like ours doesn't do the best job of telling the story for internet access. Whereas in a city, that might make sense where we have information by literal city block. When it comes to rural communities, that becomes a bit of a different story. So one of the ways we are tackling this challenge is to collect geospatially intelligent information directly from our citizens, to begin to build a more refined picture for ourselves of how our state is faring and where we should be investing targeted investing our resources. One of the geospatial tools we have in our toolbox is to use a speed test. We can then collect those results for the households of our citizens in the state, which we can then, in turn, use to start to understand in finer detail where issues might be by evaluating speeds in households. Now, we know that such tests are determined by many factors, including in-home hardware challenges, service use, how many people in a household are on Wi-Fi at one time. But if we are able to crowdsource multiple tests and look across them across an entire community, it can start to serve as another tool in our geospatial dataset toolbox and will help us serve our communities better. There are many ways in which geospatial data and analyses are supporting informed decision-making in our state. And here are just a few examples of how we can bring geospatial data sets together to begin to inform those decisions. Here we are looking simply at a municipal boundary. We can add in things like parcel or land ownership information. We can add in things like building footprints that can show us housing units and other structures on properties, perhaps beginning to elucidate areas that may or may not need service, and also internet speed test location data across our communities. We can then begin to use this to help refine what we can already learn from less detailed census block information. Now, there are many ways that go beyond simply looking at layers. We can most certainly begin to perform analyses with input data sets. And to illustrate that point here, I have a couple of examples that include cellular range and availability along our Wyoming highways. Now, just a few of the input data sets that go into this analysis include tower height, tower location, the surrounding topography or landscape, which can illustrate for us areas where towers can or potentially cannot serve due to mountains and valleys. Now, this was just a snippet of information about how GIS is being used to support informed decision-making as we as a state work to bring broadband internet access to Wyoming.